Hey there. Thank you everyone for waiting on us today. We not only rescheduled from noon to 2, but then we had to push back to 2:30 because of a scheduling conflict that came up just this morning. So, yes, thank you for your patience. I straighten my little hat there. We are waiting on Eric to join us. He'll be with us in just a moment. And I was just taking notes. The most important of which, you all know, is to start the recorder over here. I tend to forget that. All right, so we are up to, for macOS only, 4.14. Interesting. Okay, 4.14. Yep. And Eric should be with us in just a moment. It's a sunny day out. We had rain this morning. It really warmed up as the day went on. So nice thing is I'm down here in my cavernous office. Oh, it's in the basement. And it's nice and cool down here. So it makes for a much more pleasant recording experience when we don't have to have the air conditioning running and whatnot. Oh boy, yeah. So it's been a couple weeks since we've had an episode. Chuck was on our last episode. Eric has been away for a couple weeks. We're looking to get back on schedule again, starting today. This is the second Friday of August. August 11th. August 11th, according to my doc. And yeah, so we're going to be back on the 11th and the 25th. And then we'll continue into September. Now, October, there might be a little scheduling issue with the second Friday of the month. We have a family event going on. Actually, both of us do. We both have family events in October around that second Friday. So we may not get to that one. And then, of course, in September, we're going to be a little bit off as well because allegedly, if you watch Dave's In Touch with iOS, allegedly, the rumor is that September 12th is going to be the big iPhone announcement day. iPhone, iOS, Apple Watch, all that jazz. So we will likely have a reaction time episode on September 12th if that date holds for Apple's big announcement day. So we're back on schedule. We're back on schedule for second and fourth Fridays, except when we're not. So there you go. Oh, Eric has joined us. Awesome. All right, let me.
Except when we're not.
Except when we're not. Okay, let's see. I think I can get you in there now. Yes. I'm not sure if people heard you say that, but you did echo, except when we're not.
Except when we're not, yeah.
Yes.
And how is my audio? I'm trying to...
Actually, your audio is pretty good. Chuck's was horrible last time, but yours is great.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I wonder what
good, yes. Chuck's audio is horrible. Good.
No. Oh, good. Mine's all right.
I was able to fix it for the podcast, for the audio. I was able to fix it for that to bring his levels up, but the The YouTube video is just, I don't know what the heck was going on. At first, he was only coming in through one ear, and then it was just super soft, which is very unusual. I'm going to blame Ecamm Live for that. But yeah, your audio is fine.
I was gonna say, he sounded good on the on the audio, so I thought, I thought, either you fixed it or he was good. So I mean, he sounded like Chuck. He sounded like he normally does.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But the video, you can watch the video and you can see it's just the levels are just really low. And I kind of wish that YouTube had audio post-production tools. You can clip video, you can edit video to a certain extent, but it would sure be great if you could go in and do some sort of leveling or, just something, compression or something to bring your audio levels up when your guests or something is not right. And for some reason, they don't have those tools.
I know. I wonder why that is too, actually. I wonder, maybe it's too hard. I don't know.
Now, the bad thing is that what I could do is I could take the video from YouTube or from Ecamm, and I could take the adjusted audio and I could fix it, reattach it to the video and upload it to YouTube, but then it disconnects from the live stream. So this is the live stream, but then it takes it out of the live stream. It no longer lists it as a live stream and instead lists it as a regular video upload. So
which is
you can't.
No, that makes sense.
That's two things you can't do. You can't edit the audio even in a simple, rudimentary way, leveling or compression or something. You can't do that, and you can't replace a video,
which is really odd.
Yeah, Vimeo has tools for both of those things, but YouTube does not. And look, Vimeo just doesn't work for this. Yeah.
No. Yeah, and I could never figure out why YouTube doesn't let you replace a video. I never, because it really does make it hard. Because it's almost like when I edit video and do stuff, I only discover it after it's rendered, and sometimes after it's uploaded.
I know.
It's like when you type up a document and then you print it out and you're like, oh,
crud.
See a mistake. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know why it is like that. Why does the mind work? I don't know. Anyway,
we're human.
We're human. What was I thinking? Oh shoot! There was something that came up, and I was going to tell you. And now, maybe I'll remember tomorrow when I'm driving.
Maybe so. Yeah. It is live, so anything that there's a couple things we probably need to discuss otherwise, but not on the live stream.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Oh shoot! What was it?
Hello world. Here's all of our personal business.
Yes. It was something Disney related, I think, but I can't remember.
Well, that we can talk about on the live stream.
Yeah. And there was also something else that I saw that I thought you'd be interested in too. And for the life of me, it's all gone.
All gone.
Yep.
There you go.
I think when I was looking at stuff for this episode, and I think the state of Mac security, it got me all worried, and now I'm too flustered to do anything. Yeah.
Speaking of which, we need a title. We have to title this episode. Something fun, something humorous or fun or punny, but we need a title for the episode. And I have not come up with one yet.
I
had one until you changed the topic on me, but that,
Oh, well, go back to that one.
No, too late now.
We don't have to use my topic.
Too late now. The notes are taken, my friend.
What was I thinking of? What was it? Now calling private relay or what? What did you have?
Private relay. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
That was good.
I think we need to use that again.
This is where having folks in the chat room would be handy, because we could tell them what the topic is and they could chime in,
come up with the idea. I know
we've never done that before. We've never had listeners vote on what the title should be. That we should do that.
That's because usually you already have some snappy title already made up, so it's not
Except for now.
necessary. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and even now you did. It's just I messed it up.
Uh, let's see. So, what would it be? What would it be? It's just general safety and lockdown type tips, right?
Yeah, or yeah, right. Like
Ooh, I know. I have one. I just came up with it.
okay.
I think. Let me make sure I got the spelling right here. I think I do. Yes.
I can't. I keep coming up with like all your Macs are belong to us. I don't. I can't seem to come up with anything else. So
Yeah, because it's all about locking down, right? All right.
right. Or
Okay.
yeah, whatever. You had other stories that I liked too. So
Yeah, it could be one of those, but usually I base it on the main topic. I've got one. I just came up
Okay.
with one. There you go. All right. Cool. I don't know if it's any good, but I just came up with one based on locking down the Mac. That's what it's based on. We'll see. All
Okay.
right. And so did you have any news stories you wanted to add to the mix today?
not that I can think of anything. No, not that I. Not outside of the stuff I mentioned. So
Okay. All
yeah.
right. I've just got the what is it? One, two, the four I sent you. And then since the main topic
Right.
this episode is in your hands, we can just kind of go through these four stories. And actually I have a fifth one too. It's kind of a sad story, but I have a fifth, and it's not really a story.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a new snippet that a listener asked if I could share it on the show, and I said, "Oh, absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
not a problem."
Yeah.
So we got the four stories, and then your thing.
Okay. That sounds
All
good
right.
to me.
Awesome. And since we always run long, and since
Yeah.
as we get to the end of the episode, one or the other or both of us always says, I got to get going. We're going to just go ahead and start.
Okay. That sounds good.
All right. And so we're at 12:12. We're at 12:12 on the recorder. Perfect.
Okay.
All right.
12:12.
Here we go.
Ready.
Ready.
I feel like I should do some jumping jacks right now just to or some
Well,
push-ups.
if you're
just-
going here, I'll just switch to you. So if you want to do jumping
No.
jacks, please,
That's
please,
Yeah.
don't let me hold you up.
don't let me stop you. I'm sure everybody else would be begging you to stop. Switch the camera
Please
back
stop.
to you.
Okay. All right. Back to me. Here we go. Well, now we're at 12:52, but that's all right. I'll just keep my notes the same as they are. All right. In 3, 2, 1. It's for Mac Eyes Only, episode number 414 for August 11th, 2023. Welcome to Macatraz. Hey everyone, welcome back to For Mac Eyes Only, the show for the Mac community, where we share our thoughts and opinions on current Mac news and events. And joining me to talk all things Mac is Eric Erickson. Hey Eric.
Hello, Mike. I was not expecting Macatraz. That's awesome. I do like that.
It works. It works.
Yeah.
And remember, of course, if you're joining us live, we're going to be keeping an eye on the chat room too. So if you have any questions or comments as we move along, be sure to preface it with a Q and a colon, and we'll try to address it here on the show. Now, Eric, I know you have a topic you wanted to address this week, and it's a super important one. And we've also got a handful of news stories to cover. So why don't we get
Yeah,
started?
sounds good.
Okay.
It's kind of like old times where we had news stories. This has been a while since
It's
we've kind of done. Yeah,
it
yeah,
has been a while, and
yeah.
I thought if there's any news stories that aren't particularly timely, and we do have one that's kind of timely, but if they are particularly timely, boy, that's hard to say. And we can cover it. Why not? Why not cover
Yeah,
it? Because the way that we work is we often turn it into a pretty long discussion point.
right.
And I have a feeling this first news story is going to be one of those long discussion points. And that is an article from Ars Technica that asked the question, how long will the last Intel Macs be supported? Which is a question we've been asking on the show for quite some time, especially for those folks who just purchased their brand spanking new 2019 Mac Pros in 2023. Well, they did a pretty lengthy analysis of both current Macs and Macs of years gone by. And I'm not going to get into all the details, but I did want to highlight some of the important details that they mentioned throughout the article. And the first is for those who have recently purchased an Intel Mac. They say that the last of the Intel Macs are still on track to be supported for longer than the last powered PC Macs were in the mid-2000s. Unfortunately, though, they also say that they're getting fewer years of software update support than any other Macs released in the last 15 years. They say that the average Mac receives updates of about 5.5 years after, and this is the important part, after Apple stopped selling it. And it probably shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that buying a Mac towards the end of its life cycle means that you're going to get significantly fewer updates. They
Right.
do, however, go on to mention that the average Mac, on the whole, receives about 6.6 years of macOS updates that add new features. And then, as we know, they typically get another 2 years of security-only updates. And so they say that that means that 2017's crop of Macs are going to get about 6.3 years of macOS updates, which is a little under the historical average. And all this, of course, is coming to light because we're in this transition period of Intel Macs to Apple Silicon Macs. Now, I was very interested in this next bit, and it kind of plays into what I've been seeing with client Macs, quite frankly. They say the three longest lived Macs are still the mid 2007 15 and 17-inch MacBook Pros, and this is the one that ties into my clients, the mid 2010 Mac Pro and the mid 2007 iMac, all of which received new Mac OS updates for around 9 years after they were introduced. And that's kind of the sweet spot of when a lot of people switched over to the Mac, sometime around, the mid early 2000s, around
Right.
2006 when the Intel transition began. We had a big wave of switchers. So we have a lot of early adopters of the Intel platform, and a lot of those early adopters came from Windows. And so they
Yeah.
expected to hold on to computers a little bit longer, I think. And as a result, we saw Apple supporting them a little bit longer. Now they say all those, as I mentioned, they got Mac OS updates for around 9 years, and then they got security updates for around 11 years. Now, the shortest lived Mac, they say, remains the late 2008 white MacBook, which only received 2.7 years of new macOS updates and another 3.3 years of security updates from the time that it was introduced, which is a pitifully short amount of time.
Late 2007?
Late 2008 white
8.
MacBook.
Okay.
And I'll have to look up
Oh,
exactly which
yeah.
model that is, but I do remember that around that time we were noticing a lot of those early Intel Macs were being cut off sooner than later because they weren't the Intel Core 2, they were the Intel
Right.
Core processors.
Right. Yep.
And
It's probably one of those. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of those early Intel Core Macs just got lopped off really, really quickly. They say it also looked at the amount of time, or they also looked at the amount of time that Macs receive updates after they're discontinued. Models that are sold for an abnormally long time, and this is an interesting point too, like the entry-level 21.5-inch iMac, which Apple sold from 2017 to 2021. So 2021 was the last time they sold this. Sonoma
Yeah.
doesn't support it. So just because it was sold for a longer period of time doesn't mean that Apple would support them for a longer period of time.
Did they say why? Why does Sonoma not support it?
You know, that's a good question. Now it is the entry level 21.5-inch iMac. I believe that Apple considers that a 2017 model. I don't know that they ever updated it to a new model year after 2017, but they continued to sell it until 2021. So, yeah. Now, they say that that differs from the timeline that Apple uses to provide hardware repair services, which is determined based on, quote, when Apple last distributed the product for sale. So they may not get software updates, but they will likely continue to get hardware repair services because it was last sold in 2021. Now, the interesting comment to me was that ours said, this should make you hesitate before you buy the nearly 3-year-old M1 MacBook Air just because it's a little cheaper than the M2 models. And I have to say, I do agree to a certain extent. The earliest, as I mentioned a moment ago, the earliest Intel-based Macs, they fell out of support very quickly. And I do question how long those M1 series of processors, in particular the base model M1 that we found in the MacBook Air, how long those are going to be supported.
Well, you know, when you talk about the late 2008 white MacBook, that wasn't really one of the earlier ones. I mean, because I think it came the Intel transition started in 2006, right?
2006, yeah.
So, and I just looked it up. It's that the processor in that MacBook was an Intel Core 2 Duo.
Oh, it was a
It's
Core 2 Duo. Okay.
Yeah, which is really odd. It's 64-bit, and why they cut it off so quick, I don't know. That's really odd. So sometimes there's really no rhyme or reason. Yeah,
No.
actually, so
No, go
it was
ahead.
introduced in 2008. In October of 2008, it was discontinued in January of 2009.
Which is crazy.
So
Can
it
you
was like 3
imagine
months.
spending that much money, even for a MacBook, spending that much money on a MacBook and having it discontinued 5 months after it was introduced?
Right. Hardly. I mean, you got October, November, December, and then January, it's done.
Yeah.
That's insane. I know. I did not know that. I wonder. I know they had some trouble with the plastic, but I thought that was with the black and the coloring getting discolored. I didn't think it was anything.
No, there were cracks. I believe there were cracks in the white MacBook, if I recall. Especially around the screw holes and things like that. There were issues with that. Not dissimilar from the issues that Apple had with the G4 Cube, where people complained about cracks in the case, which I do still to this day wonder if they weren't a result of the casting process of that acrylic case, that it wasn't really cracks, that it was simply defects in the material after it was, formed. That doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it any less ugly to see that. But I don't know how structurally unsound they were. I think it was more an issue of a defect in the molding process than it was in the risk that it was actually going to crack through.
Right. That makes sense.
But that's neither here nor there. You know, the white MacBook, side note, the white MacBook, I believe, was the model that Steve Jobs walked into the boardroom on and asked them to put 2 screws on the other side to give it some balance. And
Oh.
the screws on one side of the white MacBook don't do anything. They're merely there for decorative purposes. There were 2 screws on one side and there were 2 screws on the other side, and that made
Just
Steve
to make
Jobs
it
happy.
synchronous.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. I believe that was the
Maybe
model
that's why-
that he did that with. Yeah.
It probably, that's why it got cut off in 2009, because they had to come out with a new model with the extra screws. Just
With the extra screws in it. Exactly. Anyway, it's an interesting article, and they do have a number of charts in there that show the up and down cycles of how much time Macs have individually received support based on the year that they were released. And then
Yeah.
you can definitely see this dip that occurs around the time of the PowerPC to Intel transition. And if you extrapolate their chart out, you can start to see that dip happening all over again as
Right.
we've now completed the transition to Apple Silicon. So, I would absolutely be worried if you were one of the recent purchasers of an Intel Mac, especially the Intel Mac Mini, but also the Mac Pro, quite frankly. I don't know how much longer
Right.
Apple's going to support that. Now, they do have some speculation on there as far as what Apple may do, and it's just that. It's all speculation. We don't know what Apple's
Yeah.
going to do.
No.
Considering the places where the Intel Mac Pro are installed and the amount of longevity that those users expect out of the hardware that they've paid tens of thousands of dollars for, I would not be surprised if Apple continues to provide support for them in terms of new releases of macOS. But I wonder, well, I was going to say, I wonder if they're going to limit who can get those updates, but that just doesn't make sense. That just doesn't make sense. If they're going to spend the development dollars on maintaining an Intel version of macOS, they're going to just keep releasing it for others. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
I would think that the Mac Pro definitely will be getting updates just because of the expense and the type of user that you would use it. Some of these other ones, presumably people might be buying more for buying on price than anything else, and they may not be the heaviest user or whatever, so they're looking at it as a deal or whatever. And so what if their thing isn't supported, as long as it still can get email and surf the web or whatever, they don't mind. And who knows? That's a good. The Mac Pro is definitely a conundrum. I mean, that's definitely an interesting thought of what they're going to do there.
What they're going to do there, my 2012 Mac Pro and my 2006 Mac Pro before it, both had at least a good 10 years of life in them before I swapped out for a new computer. Because I believe it was around 10 years into the life of my 2006 Mac Pro that I replaced it with a used 2012 Mac Pro. And then I kept that for, about 10 years itself because, not quite 10 years. It was a 10-year-old computer at the time that I swapped it for the Mac Studio. I had only owned it for about 6 years, but it was a 10-year-old computer.
10-year-old, right.
And yes, it was not getting the latest updates and it wasn't, getting the latest patches, but it still served its purpose. And where I say this kind of tied into my client work is I've had a higher number than usual clients who have 2010, 2011 era iMacs that are just now thinking about replacing them.
Yeah. Yep.
And
That's pretty common.
yeah, it's very common, and they've run a current enough version of OS 10 slash Mac OS that they don't have to use Safari. They certainly don't have to use Apple Mail. They can use one of the myriad third-party browsers and email clients and other tools
Right.
to keep that running securely
Yeah.
online without needing to worry about, running out of date software on it.
Right.
So, but they are just starting to get to that point where these third party developers are saying, okay, now we have to cut the strings. Now we have to say
Right.
the point at which we'll support you is usually they seem to be switching to 10.15. So, if you're
Yeah.
running 10.15 or higher, we're going to support you. Anything older than that, sorry. But with open
Yeah.
source browsers like Firefox, at least there's always a third party developer who's continuing to maintain the older code base and rolling security
Right.
patches into it when they can.
Yeah. Yep. And it does seem to be a lot of people tend to hold on to their Macs a lot longer than I think even PCs for a lot of things. I don't, and I'm not really sure why, but I think it's probably just it still works. It's working. Why not? Why bother?
Yeah.
I mean, I've got I don't have it anymore, but a 2012 MacBook Pro Retina that's still being used, and I think it's running at least Big Sur right now because of the
Open core.
the patch. Yeah,
Yeah.
OpenCore.
Open
Yeah,
core.
and it works good. It works great. I mean, so
I think open core legacy patcher is definitely an argument for the theory that a lot of this is planned obsolescence.
yeah,
When these third party developers who are working on a shoestring, really,
yeah,
they don't have a big budget for doing this sort of thing, but when they can keep current versions of macOS running on hardware as old as 2012
right.
or older in some cases,
Or older.
if they can get current macOS running in there and running decently,
Yeah,
which in many cases they can, I have successfully installed Big Sur on a 2010 iMac. And for
yeah,
the most part, it worked. It wasn't, the fastest computer in the world, but it certainly wasn't the fastest computer in the world otherwise.
to begin with. Yeah,
And then for comparison, I put a current version of Ubuntu Linux on that very same iMac, and it just screams. So really, a lot of times what it comes down to is, that operating system, how many features are rolled into it, what it expects of your hardware, and the demands it makes on it. Linux making
Right.
very few demands on it, and it runs amazingly well on a 2010 iMac, which is a topic I know we need to get back to again. I promised to get
Yeah.
to talk about that at one point. But
You
there's a
know-
lot of ways to bring life to older Macs if you choose to hang on to it.
yeah. Oh, for sure. And I think the planned obsolescence thing is definitely a interesting topic too, and you do kind of wonder about that. And I know there's a lot of variables too, and I know part of it is just because it can run on an older Mac doesn't mean a company may want it to, just for the standpoint of there's other things that they may need to support that they don't want to, or there's other a lot of things too. Just Apple comes out with a new operating system, they put in new frameworks that allow developers to do whatever, and you'll see this won't run on anything earlier than the latest operating system or one operating system back, because it takes advantage of frameworks and stuff that Apple just added. And so I think part of that too is where it's hard, and I think it costs money probably the further back you go to support some of this older hardware, not just for Apple, but for any company that does that. I think it's probably just one of those things where like, we're going to be spending all this money and support and whatever on these older older. And I'm not saying it's right, but I'm sure that's a cost thing too.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, and so let's be fair here. I'm not asking for Apple to support a 14-year-old Mac, mind you.
No.
If someone really wants to run a current version of macOS on it, there are ways to do it. Good luck to
Right.
you. And it's not something that the average user should do with the expectation that it's going to run as smoothly as it ever ran in the past when running
Right.
officially. And there are other reasons that Apple has to discontinue older hardware. There have been several flaws discovered in Intel processors throughout the years that
Yep.
really the only way to mitigate that flaw is to stop using that chip. That's
Yeah.
really the way to, was it
Right.
Spectre, right? Spectre is one of those things.
Yeah.
And if you want to get past that flaw, you stop using that chip,
Yep. Yep.
or you hack a workaround, which many of the operating system developers did. And
Yeah.
to ask Apple to continue to provide support for those workarounds indefinitely is nutty. So, in some cases,
right. Right.
in some cases, it's out of necessity, pure necessity,
Yeah.
that they lop off some of these models. So there are lots and lots of reasons why these older Macs aren't supported. That's not really
Yeah.
the point of the article. The point isn't really to argue one way or the other. It's a pure analytical look at, here is how long Apple has typically supported Macs at this stage in the development cycle. So
Right.
specifically comparing the PowerPC transition to the Intel transition, and now comparing that to the Intel to Apple Silicon transition. It's almost a pure analytical, with just a little bit of commentary thrown in, look at the typical support that Macs have received throughout the years. And I think it covers, let's see if I can find it here. I think it specifically covers 1998 to 2017.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're talking about the up to and including the models that Apple is not going to support with Sonoma. So if you're curious, you'll want to check out this article at Ars Technica. How long will the last Intel Macs be supported? Mac OS Sonoma gives us some hints. Over at Ars Technica, a link will be in the show notes.
Yeah. And that one other thing I think, people probably, look, I just bought my Mac a couple of years ago. It's an Intel Mac. How long can I expect it to be serviced?
Yeah.
And probably, I don't know. I mean, probably 2025, 2026, probably much more than that would probably be, maybe 2027 for security updates, but that's probably pushing it.
I've said this before, quite honestly. I would not mind seeing Apple, if they don't release it themselves, I would not mind seeing Apple release the Intel edition of macOS to the open source community.
Yeah.
And say, you want to keep your old Intel Macs running? Here you go.
Here you go. Yep.
Enjoy. Just don't ask us for help.
Right.
And you know what? The
Right.
community would embrace that. They would love it.
Yeah.
Think about,
Yeah.
these folks who are working in open core. They
Right.
would take this and run
Right.
with it. Now, the fear, I think, on Apple's part is exactly what would happen. All the Hackintoshes
Right.
that get built.
Right.
It wouldn't be
Right.
used. It wouldn't be used to keep an old Mac Apple hardware
Right.
running. It would be used to build new hardware with off-the-shelf
Right.
components. And I think that's really their fear, is devaluing the brand of macOS.
Yeah.
But if
Which
they could
is
do it in a
legitimate.
way,
Yeah.
if they could do it in a way that would help keep older Macs running and allow the community to, add in patches when security flaws are discovered, or outright replace built-in software that is no longer supported by Apple, such as Safari and Mail and whatnot, with third-party
Right.
alternatives, and provide that as an official means of keeping older Intel hardware alive, I'd be all for that.
Yeah.
However, there are great solutions, and Linux is one of them. If you have older hardware and you want to keep it running, if you have even as late
Right.
as a 2015 or 2017 iMac, and you want to keep it running, and you're worried about not being on the latest version of macOS, absolutely give something like Ubuntu or Linux Mint a try,
Yeah.
because it really is a fantastic operating system. It will do everything that you need it to do. If your main concern is, as you mentioned earlier today, Eric, getting online, checking mail, composing
Right.
documents, working on presentations, all this stuff, especially with more and more things going to the cloud, all you need is a decent browser in most cases, and you're ready to go. If your main concern is running Pages and Numbers and Keynote and Final Cut and Logic and any other Apple-specific software that only runs
Right.
on Macs, well, that's not such a great choice.
Right.
But if that doesn't concern you, yeah, I'd absolutely say give
Right.
Linux a go, and I think you'll be incredibly happy with it. I'm
What-
very happy with Ubuntu Linux and the ability to. I'm not a big fan of grabbing one of the pre-built, this looks like a Mac type distributions. Most of them
That's-
aren't as widely supported as something like Ubuntu is.
That was kind of my question. What would you say, or what would you recommend to people that, like, you know what, I'm a Mac user. I don't use a PC. I don't really know how to. I don't know if I feel comfortable trying to use another OS. Regardless of whatever, how easy it might be. Because that's a real thing for people. I mean,
Oh,
people,
absolutely.
I know people that won't switch to a Mac specifically because they think they only know how to use Windows, and they're just not going to know how to use a Mac. And I don't know.
Good luck
So
with
is
Windows
there-
11 then.
Yeah, no kidding. Seriously.
No, that's an excellent question, and we know our friend Darren suggests Pop OS, and Pop OS
Yeah,
is
that's what I was thinking too.
a great alternative operating system for the Mac. It's not as widely distributed. It does have
Right.
very good support, however, and it does look and feel very much like a Mac. It's not a Mac, don't get me wrong. It's not a
Right,
Mac,
right.
but you can set it up in a way that it looks and feels very much like a Mac if that familiarity is important to you. Much like Linux Mint feels very much like a Windows XP / Windows 7 / Windows 10 era PC or Windows computer. Pop OS
Yeah.
feels a little bit more like Mac OS than it does Windows. Now, Ubuntu is very much the same. You can easily, they don't call it the dock. I can't remember what they call it. So this is a horrible endorsement, but Ubuntu has what is effectively a dock on the side of the screen, and you can very easily configure it to go to the bottom of the screen and to not span the entire width of your display. So just by doing that, just by taking this dock of apps, which the functionality of it is almost identical to the dock on the Mac in that it's your most frequently used applications are sitting there waiting for you to click on them, waiting for you to launch them. It's a quick way to get to settings, etc. You
It's
can move
kind of
that to the
amazing
bottom.
because I know Apple has a patent on the dock. Maybe that's already expired. I don't know. But you always kind of wonder, like, how can these other companies get away with that? I know Microsoft doesn't have a dock, I think, for that specific reason. Or they have they have their taskbar, but it's not like that. It's the same thing with the central menu bar at the top, too.
Which Ubuntu also mimics.
Yeah. And so Apple must just allow it, I guess, or something. I don't know.
It's weird because in many ways, the new control center in macOS feels very much like the older, I'll just use the same term, control center in Ubuntu Linux. That's been up
Yeah.
there for many, many years. Now suddenly we have something very similar in macOS, and you click on it and you get these quick controls to do things like adjust the
Right.
volume and turn on and off Wi-Fi and all that kind of stuff. That's existed in Ubuntu for many years now.
Right.
So for folks who are wanting a much more modern, secure, up-to-date operating system, but are running older hardware, definitely give that a go. And I do promise we'll talk about this because there are, we'll talk about this in another episode because there are very specific things you have to do if it's older hardware versus newer hardware in terms of how you install it. Not the least of which is if you would like to install Linux on, let's say, a 2010 iMac, you can't do it by USB flash drive. I have tried. I have tried all ways I could possibly think of. It just doesn't work. You have to boot to a DVD. You have to have a DVD version of the installer, and then it installs fantastically. But you try to do it from USB flash drive, forget it. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. But you can do it from flash drive on a newer model, 2015, 2017, or whatnot.
Yeah.
So it just depends on the era of Mac that you're trying to do it. But I'll tell you that 2010 iMac I put Ubuntu on is running amazing.
Amazingly well.
You would not realize that it's a 13-year-old computer.
Yeah.
It runs that well.
I bet not.
So if you have something old sitting around and you want to breathe new life into it, give it a try. Okay, speaking of Firefox, this is kind of fun. I'm going to keep talking about Firefox updates as they come out because I just love this browser so much. We've talked about it at length on the show. The privacy features of Firefox, the compatibility, the fact that it's open source, that it's widely supported by the third-party development community as far as extensions.
Right.
It's just a fantastic browser. I love it. It's fast. It's gaining ground once again on the alleged speed of Chrome, which is just getting slower and slower and slower as time goes on. But Firefox is fantastic. And they're in rapid release mode right now. We just had 1.16 released, and already we're looking at version 1.17 coming out at the end of August. And one of the things that Firefox 1.17 is bringing, and this should make Apple users happy when I tell you how this works, but they are bringing built-in and automatic translation of web content to the browser. And it's going to be right in the application menu, translate this page.
That's cool.
So you can go and you can choose what language you want to translate from and to, and you can predefine the languages that you want to use in the settings of Firefox, which is all great. But again, Firefox, being very concerned about the privacy of its users, says that in order to protect the privacy of users, these new features will translate web pages locally in Firefox. So the translated text will never leave your computer. I just think that's awesome, and I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Now,
So is that any different than what's supposed to be in Safari or whatever? Is that not local or?
I have no idea.
And
have no
will
idea.
it translate Esperanto?
I would be surprised if it does not translate Klingon, but I don't know
I would be
about
surprised.
Esperanto. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a made up language, right? It constructed somebody as an old. I remember reading something a long time ago. So like an old, like it was back in the 20s or 30s. Somebody came up with Esperanto, this language, and it was going to be the language to rule all languages. But I think nobody actually used it. So
Well, we're not speaking it now, so
no.
there you go.
I think I'm going to. I'm going to be the only person that speaks Esperanto.
Now, that said, I'm going to just let that hang out there for a little while. Now, that said, there are two features that have made it back into the beta development cycle. These are one of these in particular is a feature I've been waiting for. I don't know if it's going to make it to the final version of Firefox 1.17, but the cookie banner reduction tool is back in Firefox 117 beta. And also in it is quick actions in the address bar, which is something that is now in Thunderbird as well. So those are both features that are making a comeback in the beta development cycle. They've been delayed now. The cookie banner reduction has been delayed for a few releases. Again, not sure if it's going to make it to Firefox 117. I sure hope it does. I'm pulling for it to make it to 117 because I'm very tired of cookie banners. I would just like to say, yeah, I know this is the way the web works. Just stop bothering me.
I know.
But
oh my gosh.
We won't have that opportunity until they finally roll out this feature in a final release of Firefox. And as I mentioned, this new release of Firefox is expected right around August 29th. Well, let me try that again. Right around August 29th.
Cool. Awesome.
Now, this next story might actually qualify as fun news, especially for those who are always looking to reduce cable clutter. But it does bear cautioning that attempting this yourself will very likely, if not definitely, void your Mac Mini's warranty. But developer Ivan Kuleshov shared a cool mod for his Mac Mini that allowed him to power a Mac Mini using PoE, or Power over
Sweet.
Ethernet. Now, even cooler, that Ethernet cable can also serve as a power backup for redundancy purposes. Now, this is very cool. I mean, imagine all the server rooms that are running these Mac Minis saying, wow, how awesome would this be if we could just power all these puppies with power over Ethernet? That would be amazing. And with Apple Silicon, and its low power draw, this seems like the perfect solution. Now, the Apple care busting part of this is that accomplishing this feat requires reconstruction of the original Ethernet port. Yeah, you heard that right.
Yeah.
You do have to reconstruct your Ethernet port in order to do this. Now, what you have to do is the native connector, that Ethernet port in your Mac Mini has to be completely unsoldered and then modified to use PoE hardware by integrating what they call a MagJack connector. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that term, Eric. I was not familiar with the term MagJack. But it's apparently a type of RJ45 Ethernet connector that has integrated magnets that are necessary to enable PoE functionality for the port.
That would make sense.
Yeah. While he used all off-the-shelf modules, the end result does look a bit like Victor Frankenstein was involved. However, using the stock components allowed for handling all the signal interpretation with the PoE switch, and that's how he was able to power the Mac Mini using only 12 volts. So, while I guess this is cool. Fun news, it's just not recommended news.
It's, you know what? You lost me at soldering. When you had to remove not that I haven't done it, because I have. Yeah. It's been a while, but that's totally cool. I was really hoping when you mentioned this that it was just plug a
real solution. Yeah.
Yeah. Plug a real PoE cable into it, and now all of a sudden your Mac is powered. But that kind of makes sense that it doesn't have the right jack.
Yeah, it doesn't have the right jack. And for anyone interested in reconstructing the Ethernet port of their Mac Mini, a link to the original article on Tom's Hardware plus a video showing the entire process will be in the show notes.
Nice. Totally
now,
cool.
I do... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Nope. Please continue.
I was just going to say, it's always awesome to see what people can do when they have time. When they... I never would have thought of doing that, or... Yeah. It would have taken me a lot more time anyway.
Oh, I thought you just meant when someone has a lot of time on their hands and
no, that's what I meant. That is what I meant.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying I would probably need to have even more time to do it. But it's.
Well, you have to admit a lot of great things have been invented when the inventor has too much time on their hands.
Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah.
And a lot of great software has been written too. I,
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
back in the days when I used to code a little bit, and I had a lot of time on my hands at that time. And
Yep.
that allowed
Yep.
me to sit and experiment and play with new ideas and break things and
Yeah.
fix things and all that. And it's just one of the reasons I don't get, which by the way, we have to get back to our coding
Yeah.
segments.
Yes, that's right.
We'll get to that
I know.
soon.
That's what I was just thinking about that today too, actually. But no, you're right. They're exactly right. How many things have been created because people have had time?
Yeah.
Probably the World Wide Web and software like Photoshop and yeah.
Tim Berners-Lee was sitting in his office staring at the screen of his Next and said,
Yep.
huh, I don't have a meeting for at least another 6 hours.
What can
What
I
can
do
I
in that
do
time?
in that time?
Maybe come up with a new internet protocol that will take over the world. Yes, that's what I'll do.
I'll add it to my to-do list.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, joking aside, I do have a bit of sad news. Listener and featured guest Darren Davies, he wrote to share this news with me. I had not heard it myself. And by the time we're reporting on this, you may have already heard as well. But Will Green of the British Mac podcast has passed away. Darren wrote, British Mac was the very first podcast I listened to, and Will was a fantastic person. He was full of joy and a born entertainer. Now, Darren continued that he used to download British Mac on his work PC and then copy the MP3 to his Palm Pilot so that he could get his Mac fix before he owned his first Mac. I know a lot of people have had that same experience, and as a result of listening to British Mac and Will, Darren actually got to know Will fairly well, he says, and even contributed articles to Will's magazine. Now, I also learned from Darren that Will's funeral was on August 1st. We're recording this on August 11th. And of course, our thoughts are with Will's friends and family and the entire Apple Podcast listening world who, like Darren, often got their Mac fix from Will's British Mac podcast. He will be missed.
Yeah. I did not know that. Yeah.
Now, I do have a news story here that kind of ties into the topic that you want to cover this week, Eric. If, like many users, you've turned to a one-trick pony app like NightOwl to assist with switching between light and dark mode on your Mac, you might want to consider removing it. Like now. Apparently, NightOwl recently changed hands, and in doing so, added your computer to a botnet for, as they call it, market research purposes. And while it's not entirely clear what this market research entails, the worry is that, as stated in NightOwl's terms and conditions, the app may be used to spy on your computer and send your data off to third parties. Specifically, the terms read, NightOwl app enables users to share internet traffic by modifying their device's network settings to be used as a gateway for internet traffic. Additionally, the user's device acts as a gateway for NightOwl app's clients, including companies that specialize in web and market research, SEO, brand protection, content delivery, cybersecurity, and the dreaded etc. Now, I've personally seen this type of thing happen before, Eric, most notably in the world of WordPress plugins. But it's scary to think that an app like NightOwl could be updated to suddenly turn your Mac into the town crier.
Right.
Now, the good news is, well, real quick, I want to get your thoughts on that in just a second. But the good news is that since this story broke, and I just found this out today, I read this story yesterday and got this follow-up on the story today. Since this story broke, Apple has revoked the app signing certificate, preventing the app from being launched unless you really want to launch it. And that's why this story ties nicely into what you want to discuss today. But in the meantime, a link to the original blog post that discusses the changes as well as the steps to fully remove the app will be in this week's show notes. What are your thoughts on that, Eric?
Well, and I know this has happened before, and I'm sure of it, but it's really kind of scary when you download or you install a legitimate app, and then somewhere along the line it turns illegitimate, and that this sort of thing can happen. It's just so devious. I don't know. It is really kind of just scary. I mean, there's really no other word for it, and yeah.
Even if they put a giant notification right in the user's face that says,
Right.
hey, here are the new terms and conditions. We've just adopted these. We've just purchased this app. Here's the new terms and conditions. Click agree below to allow us to make these changes. What is the typical Mac user going to do?
Right.
Click agree.
Right.
Are you going to sit there and
agree.
read all these terms and conditions? No, most people don't. And that's the real scary part, is that even if they attempted to be on the up and up and tell you point blank, this is what we're going to do, the majority of users aren't going to read that.
Yeah. Nope. And that's just human nature. People, I mean, I don't know how many times I click agree during the day or the week on different things, and I have no idea what's in there. I mean, it is just, it's just part of doing it. And I think people just, don't think about it. And now that this is something you have to worry about, and I'm glad, like you said, that is good news that essentially Apple is, revoked the keys essentially, so it can't be launched. And so now people really have to make a choice. Yeah, I want this botnet on my computer, or,
Yes. Please. I would love this botnet on my computer.
I know. Well, like you were saying, this sort of brings up something that I wanted to talk about, because and I thought it was a longer time ago that we talked about security on the Mac, but it has probably been within the last 10 years or maybe even sooner than that. And
kind of a long time ago.
About it. Yeah, kind of a long time ago. But, for some reason, I thought it was like so long ago, because I think it was back at the time when we were talking about Little Snitch, which actually, in this case, Little Snitch would be handy, not in the sense that it wouldn't remove it. Oh, sorry. It wouldn't remove it, but it would stop it from being able to phone home and connect outside of your computer. Obviously, you would have to be kind of aware of it, but you can set up Little Snitch so it just doesn't allow anything unless you approve it. So, which is a nice thing.
It not only does it stop it, but it also alerts you, doesn't it? If you're running a new app and something's trying to communicate out, I believe it actually tells you, hey, this is trying to do these things. Do you want this to happen?
Yeah, exactly. And you can decide right then and there.
And I'm sure this ties into what you wanted to talk about, but if you are running an app whose sole purpose in life is to switch your Mac from dark mode to light mode, and it suddenly wants to make all these external connections to the outside world, you really should stop and think if that's what you want it to do. I can't think of any reason why you would need it to.
No, I can't either.
And yet suddenly the app says, hey, I want to do all these things. That is one of those triggers that I know you want to talk about, to tell you, hey, let me just step back. Let me just think about this for a second and see and question, do I need NightOwl to communicate with some server out there on the internet somewhere?
Right, and send information to it, and and just about every app will send out something to a server to check for updates. That does happen.
Sure.
But but anything more than that, you should be a little bit wary, like what's going on. Why do we need to have And I've even seen that in little snitch because it'll actually have like where you are and aligned to the server, and you'll see that light up several times. You're like, okay, what is going on? Why is it sending out this much? This many times. It's just to check for an update.
Yeah.
What does it say? My daughter is calling, and sorry.
You want me to mute you while you take a call?
Yeah, sorry.
All right. You should be muted. I'll switch over to me real quick. So if you've not guessed, the topic we want to cover this week is basic security on your Mac. It's something that Eric brought up. He has a little story he wants to share, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But yeah, this is one of those things that everyone should think about, everyone should know about. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, when something happens on your Mac to cause an app like Little Snitch to throw alarms at you, or pop a message up and say, here are some new terms and conditions, and the app that you're using is something you've been using for a long time, and you learn that it was purchased by a third party, it may be time to take a look at those terms and conditions. As onerous as that may be, it might be a good idea to do so. When you get these pop-up windows as you're browsing the web, we all know they're fake, but it's amazing how many people fall prey to the messages that are in them because they are getting better and better at creating pop-ups that seem and sound legitimate. And that's just one of the things that you need to watch out for. Of course, obviously, where you get your apps from and how you get your apps and how you install them in your Mac all come into play as well. And we're going to talk about all that. And I'm pretty much going to let Eric take the lead on this. This comes from something that happened within his own family, and I know he wants to share that story with us. And then we'll talk about some of the things that could have been done to help prevent it from happening in the first place. So we're just on a brief break here while Eric takes a phone call, and then we'll be back. I think I'm actually looking at, I think I may be looking at Eric's cheek at the moment. He's using his camera on the phone as his Ecamm camera, and received a phone call he had to take. And so I believe I may be looking at his cheek. Anyway, so yeah. Oh, there is something else I wanted to mention. No, I'll talk about this during the security conversation. Yeah, I'll bring that up during the security conversation. Sorry. We'll just sit here and pause for a moment while we wait on Eric. Good news is we've been doing pretty well with internet today. I found that often before doing these live streams, well, not only do I switch over to Ethernet, which you always should do. It was something we were unable to do with MacStock and Virtual MacStock when we did that a couple of weeks back, because they didn't offer an Ethernet connection to us in the venue. But I do switch to Ethernet here when I'm going to be doing these live streams, and then I'll often reboot my router, and I found that helps a lot. The router from the ISP, I'll reboot that. It takes about 2 minutes to reboot. I'll reboot that shortly before a live stream, and very often that helps take care of the issues that we might have. And I've been watching the bandwidth as we go along, and it's been rolling along pretty well. And it was all I could do to not fire up the new beta of Ecamm Live today. So it's on, what is the new beta? The new beta is, let's see, we're on, I think it's 4.1. I'm not on the beta now. It's 4.1 beta 3, I believe, is what we're up to. I'd like to see it get maybe 1 or 2 revisions in. I noticed in the notes, the developer notes for each release of the beta, that they've been making a lot of fixes and adding a lot of new features. And when I start to see just tweaks coming into the changelog instead of wholesale fixes and things like that, then I'll start to use it for the live streams instead of the public release. But yeah, we're almost to the point where we can start using that. It's got a lot of neat new features. Now, I've been thinking about doing a short series. While we're paused here, I've been thinking about doing a short series here. It'll be its own playlist. But I was thinking about doing a short series for Mac Guys Only's YouTube channel on the basics of Ecamm Live. I know there's a lot of stuff out there about it. Some of it gets to be a little bit more complicated or complex as you're looking at things, but I remember when I started out with Ecamm Live and just trying to wrap my head around what these different features of the program were and how I could use them. And already in the short time I've been using it, this, 1.5 to 2 years that I've been using it, I've changed the way I work with it. And I was thinking that rather than you starting out and trying to stumble through some of the early stages of using it, it might be helpful if I put out a series of short videos on the basics of Ecamm Live and how to get started with it, and to give you the opportunity to bypass some of the stumbling blocks that I hit early on, and some of the, well, I don't want to call them mistakes, but some of the things I did differently at the beginning than I'm doing now. If you're listening to this and that's something that you're interested in, let me know. And I would absolutely love to start putting that out there. And it'll be a short series. It won't be super long, but just an opportunity to kind of, here's where you get started with it. Here's what you need to know. Here's how these different features work, without getting into, I think Eric is going to join us again. So I've unmuted him. But if that's something that you're interested in, and you're hearing this, you didn't skip past all this pause time, then let me know, and I'll put that series together and we'll give it a try and see what you guys think of it. Let's see. He said he's good. I've unmuted him.
See me?
I don't
see me?
See you. No.
Oh shoot. Okay, what's going on? All right, let's try this. I don't know why it's not. Okay. Can you see me now?
Yes, I can see you now.
I wonder what's going on. I wonder why that didn't. Okay. Well, slightly different angle, slightly different camera, but it works. So I don't know what was going on. Why?
I assumed that I was looking at your cheek the entire time. That's what in my vamping, I said, well, you're using the phone as your camera, right?
Right.
Using continuity camera. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
So I assumed that when you picked it up, I was just your cheek I was looking at.
Yeah. That was probably right. Yeah. Or my finger, because it was, the back camera. So
yes, yeah. It might have been your finger. Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. So
okay.
Yes. I was just vamping about all kinds of junk while we're on hold there. So why don't we just jump in? Of it. Why don't we just jump into the topic you wanted to address this week, Eric? I know you had a little story, something that went on in your own family that kind of precipitated this. But why don't you tell us what happened and the kind of steps that you took to fix the problem, but then also what could have been done to help prevent it in the first place.
Yeah. And some of those things I have answers to, and some I do not. Especially, well, well, I guess I'll have to see. But anyway, yeah. So the thing that happened essentially was that my mom on her computer, I was helping her with something, and I noticed all of these alerts popping up on the right hand side, and it would be critical virus alert, your computer is infected by viruses, or PC at risk, activate, and it just, I mean, it wasn't just one or two, it was like a dozen, and every few minutes it just boom, 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 like that, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? And it was a system alert, and so I looked into it, and she had saw that before, and she's like, and I probably was one of the times where she said, I need to update, and I've got these viruses. I'm like, Mom, you don't have viruses. You
Right.
don't just leave it. And I will say that I have the Eero router system, EERO, the Amazon's brand. Anyway, I use their Secure Plus thing. I pay $100 a year, and it includes a bunch of software and stuff too. But among other things, it also blocks. Yeah, and they might do this anyway, but it handles. It blocks incoming stuff and crap from coming in. It also has an ad blocker and whatever. But I'll notice when I'll get a report each week, and I'll notice, because I have it for the whole family, but I'll notice that, for some reason I thought I would probably have a higher, more stuff to deal with, or my daughter would, but it tends to be my wife has a little, and my mom has a ton, and I don't know what sites they go to that this
Facebook
stuff
probably.
gets blocked. Probably, I bet that's a big part of it. And anyway, so to get back to it, my mom has these, alerts coming up. And so I look into it, and I could not figure out the culprit. And when I clicked on it, which is really not something you should do anyway, it would take me to a site which wouldn't load. And I think that was, again, the Eero router. I think he just blocked it, which is a good thing. And so part of the subscription to Eero's Secure Plus thing is malware, a subscription to Malwarebytes, which I installed on her computer. And I had already installed the free version anyway, but I ran it, and it detected a few things, but not this particular thing. And so ultimately, the way that I fixed it was I just stopped the notifications from coming up.
That's it.
Which is
yeah.
kind of the
Notifications in the browser.
in this case, it was well, the actual notification center is where I found it. I couldn't really isolate it on what web page it was coming from in the browser.
Yeah, but
And
if you have browser notifications turned on, that's usually where they come from, and then the browser is sending the notifications to the Mac's notification center.
Right.
Yeah.
And and I did see some stuff in there, and I know she has some notifications she likes to get, but I think I'm just going to turn it off. It's just a source of junk, mainly. And, I think that's exactly where it's coming from, because there is I looked at in the activity monitor, I couldn't find any, bad thing running. I couldn't find anything that was, this looks suspicious and maybe this is it sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
and like I said, Malwarebytes didn't remove anything, but yeah, I think it is just notifications coming from the browser, which is kind of annoying. But anyway, so it got me to look into more things and see what else is going on. And that does seem to be, not that a Mac couldn't get viruses or not secure, but a lot of the malware or the trouble for the Mac comes in with adware, or what they call pups, potentially unwanted software. But anyway, that seems to be the most of it, because you need to type in your not only do you need to type in your password to install something, but you need to at least usually make a trip to the privacy and security systems pane, settings pane, whatever you want to call it, just to allow it to do something, and then you have to type in your password again. So, and I always tell my mom and my wife and anybody else who will listen, if you have to type in your password for anything, make sure you know why you're doing it. You know, if it's probably because you're updating something or you're installing something, and that, so if you're typing your password, it should be because it should be, you should know why. You should be like, well, it's because I'm doing this. I mean, if it's popping up to typing in your password and you're like, why is this happening? Then don't do it. Just stop there and we'll, look at it. But I did kind of look into just sort of the state of the Mac security. And like I said before, a lot of it's limited to adware and pups and that sort of thing. But you had mentioned this before, and I kind of thought of this too, because in the article that talked about the Mac support, one of the things that the article mentioned was, Intel is going to be stopping support for a lot of their chips too, the i3, the i5, the i7. And then you had mentioned Spectre, and I think there's another one called Meltdown. There's a new
right?
variant
That's the other one. You're right.
Of Spectre, and I think there's a new variant. It's a downfall vulnerability, and it seems to be limited to Intel processors. And I know Apple came up with a fix for Spectre and Meltdown, and they patched it. This was like back in 2018. And Apple patched it, I think, with their own software, but it comes at the cost of a performance hit. So you kind of mentioned this before, operating systems, developers will fix this stuff, but then one, it's not easy, and two, it usually comes at a cost too.
Yeah, you're not really fixing the problem because it's a hardware problem.
Right.
You're circumventing the problem, and that introduces, like you said, slowdowns or other issues because you're trying to code around this physical
Right.
problem in the chip.
In the chip, right? That's going to be there no matter what you do. Yeah, yeah, and so they said, obviously, this downfall vulnerability affects, like, it could, really literally affect billions of processors out there because it's the Intel processors, but they said, and it allows people, I guess the big problem with it is if you're sharing a computer with somebody else, it potentially allows, let's say you're sharing a computer, you and I are sharing a computer, we have our own user accounts. It potentially allows me to steal your data through this password, steal passwords and stuff like that through this flaw in the processor, including, encryption keys, passwords, banking details, whatever. Excuse me. And, but they said with the Mac, it's kind of an unknown because the Mac is unique. For one reason, even with the Intel processor Macs, a number of them have the T2 chip, excuse me, like Terminator 2.
Exactly, yeah.
So the security chip, a lot of that chip handles a lot of the security. So that's done inside the enclave of that chip, and so it may not affect, a Mac may not be affected by that because that stuff may not be going through the Intel CPU anyway. So it's hard to know. And then this does not obviously affect, even though I think ultimately this vulnerability did affect ARM chips as well. This particular downfall vulnerability does not seem to affect M1, M2, any of the Apple Silicon. So that's a good thing. However, there's a virus or malware. There's one such thing called Silver Sparrow, and that was first discovered in 2021 by none other than Red Canary. There's a security company. There's a security company named Red Canary, and they discovered Silver Sparrow. Anyway, it sounds like it's something that could get on your computer, on your Mac, and potentially connect to something else, almost kind of like the NightOwl thing, and they don't. It hasn't done anything, but it could potentially connect to some other server and then download a payload of deadly virus, whatever.
Well,
And,
how would it get
ransomware.
how would it get on? By way
Y-
of the browser, I presume.
y-
So a flaw in
yeah,
the browser? I mean, I would think that you would have to download or be tricked into downloading some sort of app that then installed this. Would you call it
yeah.
Night Sparrow? What was it? It was Silver Sparrow.
Silver Sparrow. Yeah, Silver Sparrow. Right. And let's see. Let's see. It said according to Malwarebytes, as of February of 2021, Silver Sparrow has infected 29,139 macOS systems in 153 countries, but most of them are in the US, UK, Canada, France, and Germany. It's unclear how many of these are M1 Macs. According to the information, both Intel and M1 Macs are affected, but we do not know exactly what the distribution looks like. So I don't know if that means that they don't know what the distribution is between M1 and Intel, or if
That's what it
it's
sounds like. Yeah.
yeah, or how it gets on there. It doesn't look like the infected account. Okay, so the malware uses the Mac OS installer JavaScript API to execute commands. So that's not really how it gets on there. Yeah, that always kind of gets me too. Whenever I see these things, it's like, how is it getting on there? Double
Typically,
customers.
typically on the Mac, it you have to take some action in order
Yeah,
for the malware or pup or adware or whatever to get on your computer.
yeah,
It's not unheard of for adware to get into your browser, especially if you're running Chrome. I
but then it should still be sandboxed within the browser, right? I mean, it shouldn't.
I don't know if Chrome sandboxes.
I
I
thought.
Firefox does. I don't know that Chrome sandboxes
I
your
thought the whole
tabs.
idea behind, with JavaScript and all that stuff in the browser was that whatever was going on, it was in the browser. That outside of like saving session storage and stuff like that, the browser really didn't have access to your computer. But you know what? Who knows?
Oh no, well, it doesn't have access to your computer, but what I'm saying is that's the malicious adware that gets into your browser, browser extension adware.
Right. Okay.
It
Yeah.
doesn't infect your computer; it just infects your browser.
Browser. Right.
That's what I was referring to. I'm sorry, I didn't mean
Yep.
to
Yeah.
conflate the issues there, but yeah, so going back to your mom's issue, do you believe it was something like Silver Sparrow or a vulnerability in the processor that allowed this software to get on her computer,
No.
or do you think it was more, because you can sometimes tell from the notifications which app is sending it.
Yeah.
Do you
And
feel it was notifications from her browser?
yeah, no, I think you're totally right about that. I think it's just coming from Safari. I think it's just a notification from a browser, and I'm sure stuff. You can't hardly go to a site today. It's getting worse and worse. Where you'll get a little pop up, to asking for the site to send you notifications, which I always
Yeah,
click no.
yeah,
Even if it's some site that I would love to know, you know, get a notification, I just click no.
right.
And
Yeah, me
where I
too.
know my mom will just, yeah, yep, I want to know when there's a new recipe, and so I think that's probably why, and where it's coming from. This Silver Sparrow, the downfall vulnerability and stuff like, it was more research that I did just to kind of look into, what's going on, with the Mac. Is it worse now? Is it something that as because like I always kind of felt that you gotta, it's, this stuff is more of a Trojan, Mac stuff is more of social engineering Trojan. It's got to trick you here, except me, because it's not really something that can just sneak on there without you knowing about it, and then all of a sudden have root privileges and start, you know, taking over. So unless there's some vulnerability that you don't know about, but I mean, and so even with this Silver Sparrow thing, they mentioned at the end of the article, it said Apple quickly took steps to override developer certificates that enabled the Silver Sparrow malware to be installed. Okay, so it looks like it was being installed through the macOS installer through developers. So there you go. So again, it kind of comes up with like NightOwl. It comes whether you can trust these developers or not, and whether they're going to put other stuff. There's going to be other stuff in the payload besides just their app, and this other junk can get on there. It's yeah.
So your mom was using Safari?
Yeah, she principally uses Safari.
Interesting. See, the place where I normally see these malicious notifications is, and I just said it a few minutes ago, it's Google Chrome. Almost always Google Chrome. The number one browser that people should not be using is Google Chrome, in my opinion. I just
Yeah.
It used to be great. I don't know what happened to it. It has become, as I've said before, the Internet Explorer of the 21st century. It is just an awful browser. I don't know what happened or why this. I don't know why this happens in Google more than any other browser, even Edge, even Opera, anything Chromium based. I don't see this anywhere near as much, but I see Chrome specifically get, and I'm going to use the term infected. It's not really quite right, but get infected by malicious extensions all the time. All the time. And I don't know what it is about Chrome that it's so permissive. It's almost like it allows extensions to install through a backdoor or something without the user intervention. But the one thing that's really annoying about Chrome is, as you said, these notifications. And the difference that I can see between Chrome and Safari with notifications is that, and I only look briefly, I don't use Safari on a daily basis, so please correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you do use it more than I do. But with Chrome, you can go in, and one, you can turn off notifications blanket. You can just say don't allow notifications anymore. But under the site settings, you can see which sites you've given permission to present notifications. You can tell it if you want to allow sites to ask to send notifications. You can turn off notifications altogether. And then you can actually go through the list of sites that you've allowed
to do
it, even if inadvertently, and remove them. Now, the bad thing is you have to remove them one at a time.
Is this
the good thing
Chrome
is you can actually,
Safari?
This is Chrome. So in Chrome, you can go through and you can granularly turn off notifications on a per site basis, but I can't find a way to do that in Safari. In Safari, it's just notifications are on or off. I can't find where to control on a per site basis.
Which is odd because they do have a per site settings. And I thought notification was included in there. But you know what? I don't know. Let me just
like I said, I don't use it enough to know that. I have to fix Chrome enough for clients that I know where to look for it. And it's under Chrome settings, and the easiest way to get it's under privacy and security, ironically. But it's if you just go to the search box in settings and type in NOTIF or something, you'll go right to the correct spot. It's let's see, you go in, it's under site settings, and then it's under notifications, and then that's where you can change what the default behavior is, and then you can go through the list of apps or websites, I should say, that have asked for permission and you've given permission to send notifications. And that, more often than not, is where you're going to find these smarmy pop-ups. Your sites, your computer's infected by all these viruses, and it's going to melt into a puddle of goo, and all this stuff is in those browser notifications. So I was curious if it was something like that.
You know what? So I'm just looking in Safari, and in the website settings, and yeah, so content blockers. Oh wait. Oh, okay. So here we go. So it is actually in the settings inside of Safari, and it's under websites, and one of them
Okay.
is notifications, and so
Good.
it looks like
All
it's
right.
and you can, there's a check mark for all of it, and then there's an allow. Okay, so that I'm going to go through that. You know what? I did not see that,
I think I
and
was so I was a victim of Apple splitting where to find these different settings. I was looking under the Mac OS settings and under
oh
notifications, and that's where I saw you could turn on or off notifications for Safari, but I
yeah,
couldn't find where the individual websites are. So it's under Safari's settings, then
right,
websites or
then
preferences if you're
websites,
on an older version.
right,
And then under there is notifications and website. Okay, perfect.
yep,
Perfect. And there's also a checkbox that says allow websites to ask for permission to send notifications. You can just turn that off. You can leave
yeah,
Safari notifications turned off, but turn off that checkbox, and then ideally won't be prompted to get those pop-ups anymore.
yeah, yep,
Now that said, those pop-ups can be caused not by the simple notifications from a browser, but they can be caused by adware, malware that's installed on your computer. But you
yeah.
ran the Malwarebytes scan and you didn't find anything, or you found
No,
the inconsequential stuff that Malwarebytes always finds so you feel
right,
good that you spent money on it.
right. The so I think though that you're right. I think it's coming from. I just need to go through the settings on hers and look at the websites, and I'm sure I'll find it in there where where that notification is coming from, and then stop it. So I think it's just coming directly from Safari, and of course that can happen whether or not Safari is even running or not. So you can
Right. Yep.
you can get notifications from websites. And I was just looking at mine, and I have a number of sites that just it says block and notify. I don't know why I don't just have block, but I have like one site that it does allow, and I think it's Mac Rumors or something. I don't know why I did that, but
So I think, just based on that brief conversation, I think one of the most important things you can do as a Mac user is not to run out and install antivirus software. It's fine if you do. I know some folks do.
right,
Some folks love to have, that extra belt and suspenders on their Mac.
yep,
I don't think that's the number one thing you should do. I think the number one thing you should do is much, much simpler than that. And it's hard as a human being who's always in a rush, always wants to get through stuff. It goes back to what we said a few minutes ago. The number one thing, read those dialog boxes.
yep,
Anything that pops up, as you said to your mom, as you said to your wife and the rest of your family, when you get a pop-up dialog box and it's asking for administrative permissions, just stop, take a beat,
yeah.
and ask, why is this coming up?
Why is this coming up? What
Am
what
I
do I need to do
actively
here?
installing software? Have I started the installation process for some piece of software that needs my administrative permission to move forward? If
Right.
you've not overtly done something to start this process, to trigger an administrative prompt, don't do it. Find out why
Yeah.
it's coming up first.
Right.
Then
Right. Exactly.
decide if it's something that you want to do. But read those dialog boxes. They, believe it or not, if you read them quickly, they can sound complicated. But when you actually read the words, just take that beat
Yep.
and say, okay, what is this telling me? It's very clear. It tells you what application is trying to do something and what it wants you to do to allow it to do that.
Right.
That
Right.
what I just said is more complicated than what the dialog boxes actually say.
Right. It's actually simpler than what Mike just said.
Yes.
Yeah.
So pay attention to those boxes and don't just click through them. Don't just enter your password. Don't just use Touch ID or whatever.
Right.
Read what it says.
I actually
especially
read what it said.
if you're not actively if you're actively installing software. That's one thing.
That's one thing.
It's a
Yep.
common thing for that to happen. But if you're not actively installing software, take a second, figure out what it is, and more often than not, if you're not actively installing software, the correct answer is cancel.
Yeah.
That's
Don't
more
do
often than not the correct answer. And by the way, if you're installing software from the Mac App Store, you should never be prompted with that. I can't
Right.
think of an instance where installing from the Mac App Store will prod you for an administrative password. Shouldn't be.
The only time you might get prodded for a password is for paying for it,
Oh,
for it
sure.
with your credit card.
Yeah,
depending
absolutely.
upon whatever.
Yeah. But to
yeah,
install
never
the
to
software,
install.
no. Yeah.
No. And the thing of it is, just like we were talking about with Silver Sparrow and some of the other stuff, or NightOwl, it's entirely possible that you're installing legitimate software that's legitimate now that may not be legitimate after it gets updated or sold or whatever.
That's right.
And or you're installing legitimate software, but also other crapware is coming along with it. And you know
Yeah.
what? That's just stuff that we'll have to. It's an imperfect thing. But you just have to keep your eyes open and hopefully, it'll be limited.
And here's a perfect example of when and where that happens. And I can tell you exactly what software will do that to you each and every time. And it ties into a topic I would like to cover on the show, but Adobe Reader. Each and every
yeah.
time you install Adobe Reader, if you do not opt out of installing the third-party software, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
Now, I don't install Adobe Reader on Macs. I
don't
install it on plenty of Windows computers, and I know that each and every time, if you don't uncheck the boxes that say install blah, blah, blah antivirus software, you're going to get it. Each and every time, whether you want it or not. It's not an opt-in process, it's an opt-out process. And that goes back to reading those dialog boxes. If you don't read it, if you don't pay attention to those check boxes, you're going to end up with all this extra software on your PC that you don't want. And I do believe that they do something similar with the Mac version, although, like I said, I don't install it enough to know.
Yeah. No.
Probably installs MacKeeper for all we know.
It probably does.
But which is, by the way, software you don't typically want to install on your
No.
Mac.
You don't.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so yes, read those dialog boxes, and that's an example
Yep.
of a trusted company, Adobe,
Right.
that
Right.
slips in third-party software because they get a
Yeah.
little something on the side every time you install it.
Yep.
Slips in third-party software if you don't pay attention and uncheck those boxes.
Which is really, really too bad. It's just, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable.
So if you were to pick a second thing, and we kind of danced around this a moment ago, if you were to pick a second thing to pay attention to help keep your Mac safe, I think that thing would be to be aware of malicious pop-ups and or notifications. Just like your mom had all these notifications in her notification center, those are effectively the equivalent of a malicious pop-up. And what I mean by that are notifications or messages or pop-ups that are meant to manipulate you through a term that you used a little while ago, Eric, social engineering.
Yeah. Right.
Your computer's infected by a virus. Your Apple ID is about to expire. Your Apple ID is going to be transferred to a Microsoft account if you don't call this 800 number. Your UPS package is going to be rerouted to FedEx and then on to Guam if you don't call this number and give us $300. It's the craziest messages. The most out of left field stuff. And yet they wouldn't do it if people didn't take action on it.
If it didn't work. I can't tell you how many times my Netflix account has been suspended.
Oh, it's awful.
Just, it's gone.
I think it got suspended 3 times while we were talking.
Oh, it's terrible.
Truthfully, I don't get that message very often, but I have gotten it. And I've gotten it as text messages as well. And that is something that
that's usually
also have to be aware of. Let's throw text messages
Yep.
in there too. Malicious pop-ups,
Yep.
notifications, and text messages, especially if you're using messages on your Mac. Because
Yep.
all it takes is a click of that link that they sent you. Like, what is this? What do they mean? My Netflix account's been suspended. You
Yeah.
click that link and boom, you've just visited a website that, thanks to the fact that you're using an old version of Chrome or a 0-day vulnerability in Safari or Firefox
Yeah.
or whatever,
Right.
and now suddenly you have this malicious software on your Mac. Now,
Yeah.
to go back real quick to Malwarebytes, one of the things I've always loved about the Mac, and it's more true now, and I'm just going to cover this very, very briefly, but one of the things about the Mac is that there are very few places on the Mac where malicious software can hide.
Yeah.
And as Apple continues to separate and isolate the operating system from the user space, that's becoming more and more true.
Yep.
And that's why Malwarebytes can run in seconds on a Mac. It doesn't. If you've ever run Malwarebytes on a Windows computer,
Oh, yeah.
come back 45 minutes to an hour and a half later, and it might still be running.
Oh,
Because
I didn't know that.
malicious software can hide anywhere on a Windows computer, absolutely anywhere. But if you want to write malicious software and actually have it do something on a regular basis, launch automatically or what have you, there's only a few places that software can hide. And that makes it very easy for you
That's
as a user
interesting.
to actually go seek it out and find it and whack it. But it
Right.
makes it just as easy for something like Malwarebytes to scan and say, okay, we've looked in all these known places. This is what we found, and this is what we can clean up, or didn't find
Yeah.
anything.
Didn't find
it's just,
anything. Yeah.
that's just something I've always loved about OS 10 and macOS is there's few and far places that something bad can hide. It can, and it's not hard for it to get there with your help, but
Right.
there are few places to hide, which always makes it much easier to clean up a Mac when there is something on it.
It makes it easier to find.
So yeah,
That's
be
good.
careful what you click and install. That's probably the third thing.
Yeah.
Pay attention to those links that come in email and messages and pop-ups and all that stuff. Anything that pops up and sounds even remotely suspicious, if you're
Yeah.
not sure, ask somebody. Always ask.
Right.
Take a picture, send it to a trusted tech person, send it to a family member, send it to somebody who might have a better idea for what
Right.
that might be, or that it may or may not be real, and get a second opinion. In other words, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Get a second opinion. Don't just trust your intuition, because oftentimes, if they're successful, if the bad dudes are successful, if they're doing their job correctly, they will fool you. I know that
Right.
sounds weird to say, but they have one job in life. And
Yep.
that job in life is to fool you. And so if they're
Exactly.
doing their job correctly, you're going to be
Correctly.
fooled and take action
Yep.
on this. So always seek out a second opinion if something sounds even remotely fishy, or click cancel. And
Yeah.
better yet, if you can quit your browser, if you can completely quit your browser and the windows go away, it wasn't real,
That's true. Actually. Yeah.
which is easier to do on the Mac again than it is on Windows.
Yeah.
So that's really three things that you can do very simply to help keep your Mac safe. What else might someone do to help keep their Mac safe, Eric?
Yeah. I think we got it pretty well covered.
I've got a list here.
I bet you do. I'm sure you do.
I was
You probably
expecting you
made
to
up a
have a
nice
list.
I was just trying to think if I put anything else down that you haven't talked about.
There's a couple things on the list that I don't think I can recommend myself, but if I were to pick a fourth thing, and this again is very simple, is to let your Mac install automatic updates. Whether it's
Yeah.
operating system updates or whether it's app updates, let it install automatic updates. Now, third-party tools that don't come through the Mac App Store, they might have an automatic update mechanism.
Right.
I don't know what NightOwl had, but
Yeah.
it may have an automatic update mechanism. But very often you are involved in some way in performing that update. And it does often involve entering your administrative password. However, Mac App Store updates, operating system updates, Mac OS, whether it be or iOS or iPad OS or what have you, leave those automatic updates on. Now, if you're leery about letting your Mac automatically update to, say, Sonoma when it comes out, fine.
Yeah.
You can set it in such a way that you'll only get security updates,
Right.
and that's cool too. And that might be the way you want to go if you're leery about jumping to even a major point release in Mac OS versus let alone a full release like Sonoma. But if you want to do that, and again, I'm going to have to troll through settings now to find it. I always knew I could tell you by
Yeah,
heart
I know.
where it was in
Where-
system preferences. But under Ventura or later in settings, you're going to find it under General, and then Software Update. And then at the very top of that is Automatic Updates. And if you click the I for information, that's where you can turn on Check for Updates, download new updates when available, install macOS updates, which is what I was just talking about a moment ago, and install application updates from the App Store. Now, the last option is install security responses and system files. Definitely keep that one on. Definitely
Yeah.
keep check for updates on, and possibly even download new updates when available. And then whether you want macOS updates to install automatically or not, that's a decision you'll have to make. I personally will often wait a couple beats on those, even
Yeah.
a point release, and just give it a little while to shake out, let Apple find any
Yeah.
bugs that come up, and then I'll install them manually. But application updates from the App Store are generally pretty safe to allow as well.
The one thing I would say with the application updates is if you are a user of their pro apps, you may want to keep that on a manual thing.
Good point.
Yeah, I would like it if they would set it up so that the like Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro and Motion, all that stuff would be in a little bit different. Like you could maybe set those separate. Because I have had situations where it's been an auto update and all of a sudden some update to Final Cut broke something, and now if you have a time machine backup, you can try to roll back, and so usually that'll work, which is good. But if you don't, you can be stuck. So until Apple fixes whatever, and so if you're counting on that stuff working, then I would say to leave it on manual and just do this. Make sure, just like you said with the Mac update, wait a beat, make sure everything's cool with it, and then do the update.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point, and I'll extend that to other third-party apps that you might use on a either prosumer or professional basis where you depend upon them. Things like the Affinity apps, Photo Designer,
Yeah.
Publisher, things like the Adobe Creative Suite, even to a certain extent, Office 365. Now,
Yeah.
there are so many issues discovered in Microsoft Word and Excel and apps like that I tend to leave automatic updates on there.
Yeah. I
But
do too.
even that is one where maybe you want to install the updates manually instead. If you depend upon it if you just depend upon it,
Right.
if it has to work, you may want
Yeah.
to install updates manually. And you actually brought up another great point there. Whether you meant to or not, make sure that you are backing up your Mac on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Whether it's time machine backups, even if you're depending on something like a cloud backup service, something
Right.
like CrashPlan or Carbonite, not my first pick for backups. I always like to have a nearline backup or something that's local, so that in the event that something
Right.
like Final Cut does get an update and I need to roll back, I can do so much more quickly than trying to download it from Carbonite or what have you.
Right.
But Time Machine is great for that, and it's also great for things
It is.
like restoring the way you like to use your Mac to a new Mac that you just purchased. Time Machine is
Yeah.
awesome for
Yep.
that. But it's
It really
especially
is.
awesome at things like recovering a file in the event of a mess up, some sort of mess up,
Yeah.
whether it's an app update or you inadvertently save something in a document and you didn't mean to save that, or you just completely destroyed an image that you were working on and
Right.
instinctually pressed Command S to save it and you didn't mean to.
Yeah.
Well, Time Machine's, and I've done all those things, by the way. Time
Oh,
Machine
I've done it too.
is perfect for that, and
Yep.
probably the backup mechanism I would recommend. I know that there are some
Yeah.
reasons you might not want to use it, but for the day-to-day user, Time Machine is it. Get an external backup drive, whether it's an SSD or a traditional hard drive that's at least double the space, has double the storage space of your internal storage.
Yeah.
Connect it up, let the Mac detect it, ask if you want to use it for Time Machine, say yes, leave it on, and you are ready to go. That initial backup's going to take a while, but once that's done, you're good to go. And then we've
Yeah.
talked about
You
other
know.
things like Carbon Copy Cloner and Super Duper and things like that, and those
Oh
are
yeah.
fantastic. And you can
Yep.
schedule those, and you can let those run automatically. But Time Machine has that extra something something of being able
Yeah.
to instantly restore a file or a photo or a document or something that those others they just lack that nuance of going back in
Yeah.
time that Time Machine has.
The Time Machine really is a set and forget thing. It's really easy to use, and yeah, and while people could probably list reasons why not to use it or whatever, or why something might be a better backup system. The thing is that it's better to have a backup than not. And
Yeah,
Time Machine is simple enough to use, easy enough to use, and works well enough. It works great that people can use it and rely upon it generally, and you have a backup versus not, and that's just a big deal. It really is.
yeah.
So yeah,
I think you hit the nail right on the head there. It needs to be simple. It needs to be something that you can turn on and not have to think about.
right,
And even if you have a laptop and you only plug in the Time Machine drive once a week,
right,
that's still far better than
yeah,
than even iCloud, iCloud backup or
right,
iCloud Drive. I mean, it's
right,
nice to turn on your desktop and documents into iCloud. I do not do that. It's nice to turn that on and say, okay, well, if it's on my desktop or in my documents folder, it's backed up, but nothing
yeah,
else gets backed up to iCloud Drive. That's it. It's desktop and
right,
documents only.
right,
Maybe someday Apple's going to work toward a Time Machine-like backup mechanism for iCloud, but until they can figure out how to allow people to back up 500 gig or a terabyte or 4 terabytes of data
right, yeah,
to iCloud and do so reliably and do so
right,
simply, I think some sort of local external storage is going to be the way that we need to go. And it could be a
yeah.
NAS drive, a network attached storage drive as well, by the way. It could be that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
But if you don't mind spending a few bucks, if you've got a 500 gig laptop and you don't mind spending $60 on an external 1 terabyte SSD that you can
yep,
plug in and not have to think about, and for folks watching, this is something that I've been using more and more, which is from Crucial. These things it's the Crucial X6 portable SSD. I think this 1 terabyte one cost me $60, something like that.
wow,
And it's USB-C, and the whole drive is maybe 2 inches square. It's super tiny, out of the way. You don't have to think about it. I had it connected to this Mac earlier, or I would show it, but I moved it over to my other desk. But they're incredibly tiny little drives, and the price point on them just can't be beat. Is it the speediest
yeah,
thing in the world? No, they say it can run up to 800 megabytes per second. Well, that's pretty darn fast for a Time Machine backup. So
yeah,
there you go.
exactly.
I edit Final
And
Cut video off of those, and I think
oh
it works
yeah, so
great.
it's perfect then. Yeah, if you can edit Final Cut video, yeah. And what was I going to say? Even like you were mentioning, even if you plug it into your drive once a week, you have your MacBook, whatever. Time Machine does do snapshots and do like local backups on your laptop in the
Yeah,
meantime. And
it
so
does.
you do have that stuff. And plus I think it's a big part of version history and all that stuff the way Apple does it. So yeah, it's totally worth doing. Even if you supplement it with something else or do something else too, that's great. Time Machine is totally worth it, especially if you don't have any other idea or plan to do anything.
Yep. Next, I would say, quite simply, turn on your firewall. Turn on the Mac's firewall.
Yeah.
I have never had an issue with the Mac's firewall being on.
No,
There
I haven't
might
either.
be instances where you are attempting to connect to a Mac from another Mac that has the firewall enabled, but quite frankly, it's always been easy to, punch a hole in that firewall and allow that type of traffic through. Apple does a
Yeah.
great job of it, especially if you have some sort of software running that requires external access. You'll very often be prompted to enable that access through the firewall. And if you aren't, you can
Right.
go into the firewall settings and just turn it on granularly. But for day-to-day use, for everyday users, turn on that firewall. And again, under settings, you'll find it under network and then
Yep.
firewall, and
Yeah.
just turn it on.
Yep. I've had mine on forever. I usually one of the first things I do if it's not already on. So yeah, no, it's terrific.
Go to a hotel and join their wireless network, and you can very quickly see who doesn't have their firewall on,
I
because you'll
know.
start to
I
see their
know.
iTunes libraries and their movie
Right.
libraries and all this kind of stuff.
Bill's iMac, whatever.
Bill's, yeah,
MacBook
Bill's
Pro.
iMac
Yeah.
or whatever, yeah. And
Yeah. I know.
now, granted, you can share that stuff through the firewall. That's true,
Right.
but
Right.
if you don't have it on, it's all anything that you're sharing on your Mac is just out there for people to
Out there.
see.
Yep.
Now, that, okay, side note here, if the hotel has, or the coffee shop or whatnot, has their wireless network set up correctly, you will be isolated from everybody else in that wireless network. But
Right.
my experience is they're not often set up correctly, and you can
No.
very frequently see other computers on that network.
Oh,
However,
easily.
if they set them up correctly, you'll be isolated, and it won't be an issue. But
Yep.
that's easy enough to just turn on the firewall and forget it. Set it and forget it, as you said.
Yep.
I took this note. When you set up a Mac, you're pretty much required to do this. Apple makes it very easy to use your Mac with this set, but turn on a password for login. That's it.
Oh, yeah.
Just turn on a
Yeah.
login
Yep.
password. Set a
Yep.
password on your account and require a password be used to log into your Mac. It takes just moments to type it in. And in the future, as we start to use passkeys, it'll become even easier. But
Yeah.
if you can turn on, if there's no other reason not to, turn on a login password. Don't
Right.
let your Mac automatically log you in. Turn off that feature.
Right.
Require
Turn
a
it.
password, and if you can, enable Touch ID. That's great. Go ahead and do that.
Yep.
But just
Yep.
make sure that there is a mechanism, something that can help prevent someone who might gain access to your Mac from gaining access to your files because
Yep.
you didn't have a login password set.
Right. Yeah. Nope. That's exactly right. No matter what.
The other thing I wrote down here, and this kind of ties into what you were talking about earlier, Eric, is just go through your applications folder. Go through your applications folder and look for apps that you don't use or you don't
Right.
know how they got there. you know,
Even more importantly.
yeah, more importantly, if you don't know how it got there, you don't use it, you haven't used it in years. If it's an app that was brought forward to your new Apple Silicon Mac and it's got that little no sign over it, you
Yeah.
can't use it anyway, so you might as well get rid of it. But get rid of anything and everything that is no longer needed. Not only are you going to gain more space on your Mac, but you'll potentially gain a little extra security as well, because the older an
Right.
app is, the greater the likelihood that there will be some flaw in it that can be exploited. And if
Yep.
it's something you're not regularly using, especially if it's a remote access type app, you'll often see on people's computers old versions of LogMeIn sitting around, and
Yeah.
other apps that they don't even know how it got there because they called for support one time and they had them
Right.
set it up, and it could be
Yep.
Splash.sos, it could be LogMeIn, it could be what's the other one called? The other popular it doesn't matter. The other popular remote, anything like
Oh,
that
yeah. Yeah.
that you see, just get rid of it. If you need it again in the future, you can
Right.
reinstall it. It's super simple to
Right.
do. Just get rid of that kind of junk, because if something like LogMeIn is running automatically on boot time every time because you called for support somewhere once,
Right.
that's a vulnerability, and you want to
Yeah.
nip that in the bud. But even third-party apps that may not be remote access type apps, old word processors and old games and just free up that space, and
Yeah.
get rid of the worry that there might be something that you don't want on the Mac as a result of
Exactly.
having that.
And it doesn't have to be just, I was using Intel, now I'm using Mac Silicon. You could just be older. You could just have an Intel app and Intel machine and have a newer OS, and whatever app is not going to run anymore, and
Doesn't
it'll
run.
have a little no sign. Yep. Get rid of it.
Yep,
Exactly.
exactly. So here, this is something I came across as I was creating the list, and I would really like to get your opinion on this. I don't know what you think about this feature, but Apple has a feature on the Mac called FileVault, and
Yeah.
you can enable FileVault, and that will encrypt your internal storage drive.
Yep.
And as a result of that encryption, we talked about this when we were talking about, your legacy. If you are no longer with us and people don't have the ability to sign into your Mac, there's no other way to recover the data that's on your drive if it's encrypted. And that's cool if
Right.
that's the intention. But
Right.
I hesitate to recommend this as a general course of action, even though Apple does suggest it and require an opt out to turn it off every time you start up a new Mac. But what do you think about enabling FileVault on a Mac as a general course of action, as a means to help be more secure versus as a means of protecting your data?
Yeah. It's something that I do. And probably, and I think probably Apple probably thinks this way too. If you have a laptop, it probably makes even more sense. I think the idea is that somebody can pull out your drive and now have access to your data, and I, I think, yeah, like you said, you can have the situation where you pass away, somebody doesn't know your password, now they can't get at your data, but I think it's one of those things. I think you're better off having it turned on than not. And it is something that once you turn it on, you don't notice anything. I mean,
No,
there's no
no, you don't.
performance
That's
hit,
true.
and you just kind of forget it's on. But you have the protection now that if somebody were to get at your system or were to get at your drive, that they wouldn't just be able to get at your data easily. So I guess for what it's worth, especially with Apple's updated file vault. Now, if you have an older Mac with the older file vaults, I wouldn't turn it on. But I don't know if it's file vault 2 now or whatever it is. But the when they switched to whole disk encryption and made it work a lot better, to me, I think it's worth it.
Good point. Good point. Along those lines, we talk about this all the time on the show. Use secure passwords. In the future, we're going to have, in the very near future, and we talked about this on Dave's In Touch with iOS last night, but in the very near future, we're going to have this option of using passkeys. Now, passkeys is not necessarily new. It's been around for a while, but the ability to use it in a much more seamless manner is coming to us in iOS 17, and then I presume Sonoma, although I'm not 100% certain on
Yeah,
that.
I don't either.
But passkeys is going to be something that allows you to use something like your phone as your password, and it does so in a very fast, seamless manner. But until that point, and in situations where you need to have a backup login method or a second way to gain access to an account outside of passkeys, use strong, secure passwords. And along
Yeah,
with that, use a password manager, whether it's
right.
one password, whether it's Strongbox, whether it's, whatever it is, Bitwarden, whatever it is, if it's something that you understand and you will use and will integrate into your browser and integrate into your daily Mac using life so that you can use complex, and it doesn't mean just random gibberish. Complex passwords can
Right.
be
Right.
a series of words strung together by hyphens. That can be a complex
Right.
password. But if it can be something like that that allows you to adopt better practices of not repeating the same password on multiple sites, on
Yeah.
multiple accounts, multiple applications, and even give you a hand in generating new passwords
Right.
that, by the way, you don't need to memorize.
Yeah.
If you can memorize your password, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Don't create memorable passwords. Create passwords that can't be memorized, and that helps guide you to the fact that it may be a more complex password. But use a password manager. Use unique, secure passwords on websites and email accounts and internal applications and what have you, and that will lend a ton of extra security to your daily computing life.
Yep. For sure. And that's the beauty of the password manager. You don't have to know what your password is. You don't have to fill it in. It can generate it for you, save it, and enter it for you when you go back. So yeah, that I, it's you definitely should be using a password manager. If you're not, you're not, you're doing yourself a great disservice.
Yeah, yeah. I have one more, and then we can wrap things up. Unless you have any others that you want to add to this list, I have one more that I don't think we've ever mentioned on the show before, and I thought it might be worth addressing. But did you have anything else you wanted to add to the list on keeping your family's Macs safe or our listeners' Macs safer?
I don't think so. No, I think between you and me, I think we got it. Everything I wanted to say anyway.
Well, the last one I wanted to mention is something I came across just this morning, and I thought, I'm going to add that to the list. I don't believe we've ever mentioned this on the show, but there is in your Mac settings a section called Privacy and Security. And
Yeah.
it was recommended, and I think this is a good idea, to go through privacy and security and see what applications have access to what on your Mac. In other words, what
Yeah.
has access to location services? What has access to your contacts? What has access to your calendars? What has access to your photos? Is there an application listed under privacy and security and then photos that has access to your photos? And you look at that and question why.
Why does I have access?
why does that have access? In other words, when an app installs and it says, do you want this app to have access to your photos? Do you want this app to have access to your location? Do you want this to have access to what else? Your camera, your microphone, what have you?
Right.
Do you just
Why?
click yes, or do you stop and take that beat and say, should this app,
Why?
should Facebook have access to my camera? No. No,
Yeah.
don't allow Facebook to have access to anything. Don't even type anything into Facebook and you'll be much more secure. But
Why does NightOwl have full disk access?
exactly. Exactly. So the actual term that was used, and I'm going to use their term, I'm going to borrow their term, audit your privacy permissions. Go
Yeah,
through
that's
privacy
good.
and security and just click on everything. Click on full disk access, click on file and folders, click on desktop, click on input monitoring, click on screen recording, Go through
Yep.
every single one of these. This is the most complex suggestion that we're giving today,
Yeah.
only in that it's going to take a little while to go through it. In terms of
Exactly.
actually clicking on location services and then seeing what has access, that's simple. But, okay, so just for example, I clicked on photos and I can see that Final Cut Pro, Google Chrome. Why does Google Chrome have access to my photos? I don't know. I'm turning that off. iMovie, Pixelmator Pro, those all, and Darkroom all have access to the photos on my Mac.
Yep.
All with the exception of Google Chrome, which I had no idea. Why would that have access to my photos? I don't know.
I
That's
don't know.
That's being turned off right now.
Yeah.
But there you go. I went through and I audited my photos, privacy and security, and very simply just flipped a little slider and said, nope, Google Chrome does not have access to this. And then when there are more options, like Darkroom, for example, next to the slider has a little button labeled Options, and I can click on that and I can choose, does it have limited access or full photo
Right.
library access? So those are
Yep.
the types of things that you might see. There are apps, for example, on mine, I have an app called Disk Inventory X or Disk Inventory 10. I'm not sure how it's pronounced. That scans the drive to look and see what's taking up all the space on my internal storage. Well, that
Right.
obviously needs access to my photos if it's going to report back to me how much space those
photos
photos are taking. So you might have to stop and think for just a second. Okay, I know this app. I installed this app. It says it has access to my photos. Why might that be? Oh, right, because Disk Inventory X needs to be able to tell me how much space
Right.
those photos are taking. So that's why this is the more complex of all of our suggestions, but it's not hard. It's just something you have to go through, click on each one, see what has access, and turn off what you don't want. Or better yet,
you don't,
uninstall
yeah.
it. I don't need Google Chrome anymore. I'll just get rid of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No,
that
that's
is my
excellent.
last suggestion, Eric.
It's a really good one, and that's probably the best one of the day, actually. And I do go through that every once in a while, and some of the stuff that you see in there that's really kind of alarming, or I don't know how to, is sometimes they'll like have names of like, I think it's names of the developer, because I've actually had to look it up and see
Yeah.
who is this per, and then it'll say, oh, okay, that's that software or whatever, and so you just like, ugh, you know. So yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm going to add a bonus item right now. This is a bonus item, and this became much easier to do with Ventura. Ventura is when setting came about, right? Not Big Sur, Ventura.
I think, yeah, Ventura. Yeah.
This
Ventura.
this is the best thing to come out of the new settings app on macOS Ventura. If you go under General and then go to Login Items, this is way better than any option we ever had in the past for items that we want to run at login on our Mac. Because not
Oh
only does
yeah.
it tell you what items you set to automatically log in, as we always could do in the past, but now it also lists all the background apps as well. So underneath
Yeah.
Open at Login at the top, you can go through that and I can see, okay, I've got Dropbox, I have ItzyCal, I have JumpCut, I have Popcar, I have Type It
Yep.
For Me, I have, so these are the apps I said can start at login. And then underneath it, and this ties into what you were saying, because I have run into instances of that where it's like the developer's name or some weird name or something
Yeah.
like that on it.
Yeah. I'm looking at that now. Yeah.
You can allow in the background, I have 1Password, I have Carbon Copy Cloner, I have CardHop, I have Dropbox, I have Ecamm, I have Elgato Control Center. And then I have a few things on here where I say, I have no idea what MUCSM Ltd is.
Right.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So I'll do a little search on it and try to figure out what it is. In some cases, there's a little eye, an information eye in a circle that you can click. and it will actually take you to the folder where that
It's a
item
file.
is.
Yep.
But that's, in my experience, that's rare. I wish it were on every single one of them.
Single one of them.
But
Yep.
in my experience, that's rare. But I can go through and I can simply turn off every single item that I don't want to open
Right.
in the background as I start up my Mac. And that would be another great audit that you can do. Settings, general, login items, and just see what's starting up and starting in the background on your Mac, and turn off things that you don't need running. Not only are you going to save memory, but you could potentially stumble across something that you don't want running all the time.
One running. It's
Yep.
nefarious. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Whether nefarious or not, it may
Yeah.
just be something that you don't want or
don't
need
want
running.
running.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, excellent suggestion. Well, then, Eric, I think that's going to do it for this episode of For Mac Guys Only. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Remember, we do love to get your letters, so if you have any comments about the show, a tip to share, a software or hardware problem with your Mac, or maybe you have your own security suggestions for keeping your Mac safe, not only online, but, in your daily Mac using life, well, be sure to leave your favorites in the comments of this week's show notes found at formaceyeesonly.com, or drop me a line, mike@formaceyeesonly.com. And be sure to subscribe to this show's YouTube channel at youtube.com/FMEOTV, and click that little notification bell so you can find out when we're going live. You can join the chat room and catch all the behind the scenes stuff that doesn't make the final cut of the show. Eric, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Eric at For Mac Eyes Only.
Well, that's pretty simple.
That's the best way. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for listening, everyone. Thanks to Eric for joining me this episode. Stay subscribed. I'll let you
Cue
say
the
that
music. Cue the music.
again. No, don't. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you.
This is the behind the scenes stuff that doesn't make the final cut
Yeah.
of the show. All right, I'll do it again. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. And thanks to Eric for joining me this episode.
Thank you.
Stay subscribed. And we'll talk to you next time. There you go. Now,
Now cue the music.
there we go.